Good morning and welcome to our first build-along video featuring our timeless duffel. In this video I'm going to show you how we take the purchased hide and through various processes turn it into a duffel bag that'll last you for generations. So the first step in our process is we do the rough cuts, which is we take the full hide, which you can see in the Springfield leather unboxing video, of the espresso latigo leather. We lay it all out and then we start roughly shaping in where the parts are going to go. So in the video that you'll see, we'll take these pattern pieces, place them on the leather, rough out where each part's going to be, and then we cut out with a generous margin around so that we can do our detail cuts later. So to do this task, a couple things that I'll need. You'll see me use several steel rules to get straight lines and my prison shank, scratch all there, to basically just trace around each of the patterns to get a position for where that pattern's going to be so I don't cut into where the actual part's going to be, and plain old box cutter. I do use just a plain box cutter for most of my work. They do make specialty leather knives. I don't have any of them. Box cutter works okay. I'll probably buy a nice knife at some point to keep that knife sharp. I just have a really cheap pocket sharpener there where I just draw the blade through just to keep it from snagging on the leather.
So the first thing we do is we unroll our leather and place it down on the dining room table. Start doing layouts on all the component pieces. First thing I'm going to grab is my steel rule and I lay out where the strap goes. A steel rule is 2 inches long, which is the same as a strap. It gives me a nice clean line to go off of. I start with the straps because the straps need to be cut from the spine of the animal or up towards the top where the grain is the strongest. I do all my cutting on my wife's dining room table, and I'm very careful not to scratch the table as I'm really like sleeping in my own bed as opposed to the couch. You see me place a green cutting board underneath my blade and move that along as I continue on to avoid gouging the table. Here I'm using a steel rule to lay out where the laces are going to be cut. Laces are used to bind up all the individual component items of the bag. Up to now, I've only been cutting the straps and the laces, and now it's time to start cutting out the individual components of the bag. At this stage, I'm only using the scratch awl to outline where the components will rest. I'm not actually cutting the final shape. Instead, I'm just marking out where the part will go, and then I'll run my blade along to just roughly cut out the part. And we'll do some detail cuts later to make sure that we accurately follow the cutting line. During this phase, you'll see me cut out a bunch of individual components from a larger piece and stack up the components right in front of the green cutting board.
Next step of our process, we take those large pieces of leather, lay them out on our table here, and trace around where the marks are that were left by the scratch awl to get a more precise cut around. Usually you have to give 2 cuts on leather this thick. The first cut is a tracing cut, establishes the line of the blade so that it doesn't wander or veer into the product itself. And then the next cut is kind of a power cut that goes all the way through the leather and punches through the other side. You'll see me use a couple tools for this. Again, a few different kinds of steel rules and straight edges to keep my blade from walking. Our handy dandy box cutter that we use during the rough stage, and a roller wheel to trace through some of the straight portions that are more efficient to cut through on a straight line.
If you keep an eye on the desk light, you'll notice that it's constantly changing positions. What I'm doing is changing the light so that I constantly am cutting in a raking light. Makes it easier to see the mark left by the scratch awl.
Now that that's done, next step is to take the cutout pieces and run them through our sander. Big piece, the main part of the bag, I just do by hand with simple block sander, 120 grit paper. The rest of them, it's a lot more efficient if I take it out to the garage and run it through my power sander. I clean up the edges a little bit, and that's as a result of the blade coming through twice. So the first cut that establishes the initial line, the second cut coming through doesn't always trace that line perfectly. So sometimes you get a little bit of a double line on the edge of the piece. So running through the sander helps clean that up. The other thing it lets me do is any of the radiuses that I had to cut with a straight blade through multiple cuts, which you can see in the video, I can clean up on the sander and get a more clean, more defined radius on the piece.
This part of the process only takes about a half hour, which was a really good thing because it was about 30 degrees outside that day and my hands were super cold.
Now that everything's cut out and sanded and square, next step is to bevel all the edges. This is a specialty leather tool. It's a very small, can't even see that. It's a very small gapped blade that's either flat or concave, rounded. Question: what kind of beveler is best? On the one hand, you have the straight beveler, which is easy to sharpen, but doesn't leave a nice edge. On the other hand, you have a concave beveler, which is more difficult to sharpen, but leaves a nicer, rounder edge. And that gets just traced all the way around each edge to take that square profile and just kind of round it over a little bit to, one, clean up the edges, make them look nicer, but also gives a nice feel to the hand so that your hand's not running across any hard edges. It's not that it's sharp or anything, but it is a little bit unpleasant if you don't do this step.
Overall, this is actually one of the more fun parts of the process as the blade runs across each piece of the leather. It's only enjoyable as long as the blade is sharp. Here you can see me flip each piece over onto the reverse side as both edges need to be beveled in order to create a nice clean profile. And last but not least, we bevel out our large main part of our bag.
Now that we got everything cut out, beveled, sanded, ready to go, we go back to our pattern pieces and mark out all the holes to do the assembly process. So this entire bag is held together by farmer's ties and Chicago screws, which just through two adjoining holes join the pieces of leather together. There's very little sewing in this actual project. So we take our pattern board. This is composite material, has a very smooth top. Textured back keeps it from sliding around on the leather. Once we have that set down on our individual pieces, grab our little prison shank. I sell these at Joann Fabrics. They call them roundels, but I know what it is.
Oh, Nana, not my prison shank.
Anyway, you go through and you mark out all the holes. I have no idea how many are in this bag. Maybe I should keep count. I'll let you all know. You just keep marking. Once those are marked, they all get punched out. I've got a couple tools to be able to do this. One's probably not any better than another. It's just with that many holes, it gets painful and a lot of pain in your hand doing one thing all the time. So sometimes I just kind of switch out how I'm punching the hole. Primary one I'll use for all the interior holes is a CS Osborne No. 6 punch with whacking mallet. Alternatively, to go around the outside edges, I just have a CS Osborne squeeze punch in the same size hole. That is basically an upgraded, beefier version of the same kind of rotary punch you can buy at Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever. They work about the same. The tips are pretty much the same. The holes are the same. About the only thing that's better off of the CS Osbornes that I can see is the tips are replaceable, which is nice. And then the body structure. I can crank on that thing as hard as I need to and it's not gonna bend. And I've probably bent 2 of these already because of the bent sheet metal frame that makes it up. Now you gotta be torquing on it pretty good to be able to do that, but I have done it. You can bend it back into place, but these things, not going anywhere. So next steps, like I said, let's mark it out and get everything marked and punched.
I'm going to double time through this entire screen capture because it is one of the most long and tedious parts of the process. It would be very difficult for me to overstate how incredibly painful this part of the process is. Here I switched to my punch and mallet because 1, my hand is getting extremely tired, and 2, I need to start punching out some of the interior holes that I can't reach from the edge.
Alright, now we got all the holes punched, now it's time to start finally assembling the bag. First steps is to do the fold over and binding on the top edge of the bag. So when the bag is finished, this will be the top of the main opening. So to do that, we just fold over that big flap over here and put 5 Chicago screws in through the top. So to do this, need a couple of tools. First, a couple spring clamps. These are used to fold over the leather and hold it in place while I place the Chicago screw. As you can see, leather that thick really doesn't like to bend over. So you need something to kind of hold it in place. So I need another set of hands to be able to do that. So once that's folded over, now it's time to start putting the Chicago screws in. So up to this point, we've been using our little mini round awl to do all the work that we need to mark out patterns, but now it's time for our big boy. This is obviously just a modified screwdriver that I've driven to a point that I run through the hole to kind of widen them out. So the leather is kind of spongy, so if you push around all through there and kind of spread it out a little bit, you can push the Chicago screw, and then over time that leather comes back and clamps down on the Chicago screw. This is really helpful when it's time to start tightening it down, so the leather itself grips the other half of the Chicago screw while I tighten it down with my screwdriver.
In about a second here, you'll see me take my sweatshirt off because that first hole was absolutely giving me nightmares. But once I got the first Chicago screw in, the rest of them kind of came together pretty easily.
So everything up to this point was the easy part. Cutting it out, getting all the pieces ready, takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 4 hours. The rest of the 10 hours it takes to make each bag is pretty much this step where the leather is woven together. That's the unique part about this bag. None of the individual pieces are actually sewn together, which can be a very quick process if you have a sewing machine. They are woven together using leather. So, for example, on our bag here, this piece here is the gusset on the pocket, and this is the front of the pocket here. And to attach those together, what we use is something called a farmer's tie, which is about a 1/4 inch wide piece of leather. It's square knot on one end and then gets woven in and out and in and out for each of the pieces of leather to hold everything together and cut off and tied at the other end. The holes are also undersized compared to the width of the leather strip that I use, which means for every single hole, most of them have to get opened up using our round awl. Wish me luck.
Here I'm putting together the first front half of one of the pockets. This is where I start to finally see the bag start to come together. You actually need a lot of hand strength to be able to do this part of the process, even with the awl helping out and opening up some of the holes. As you can tell by the wardrobe change, I don't do all of this in one sitting. I work for about an hour or so and take a break. I assemble the whole bag over the course of several days. Here you can see me start to take measurements on the farmer's tie as I'm working, just to make sure that I don't run out of length halfway through a stitch. This entire clip is just me assembling the single handle that goes on the side of the bag. Now that the end caps are done, next comes attaching the end caps to the bag. As you can see by the amount of movement in the video, this step of the process is a bear to keep the bag in a position that allows me to keep sewing. Here you can see me working the night shift in my PJs trying to get the second end cap onto the bag. If getting the first end cap on was a bear, the second one is just as difficult, if not more so. I constantly have to move the bag around and fish my hand in and out of the main compartment in order to grab onto the line and pull it tight. Finally worked up enough of the sweat that I can finally ditch the sweatshirt. It's pretty cold in my office. There's actually only one heating vent pretty far away from the main heater in the house. In this clip, I'm nearly finished with the bag. Last step is to place the 2 Chicago screws on each side. That kind of takes some of the stress off of the leather holding the end caps together. In this clip, I'm grabbing the 1-inch strips that are the closures for the main compartment and getting those all prepped and attached to the bag. Sometimes I do this before I've attached the end caps, sometimes after. I'm still not sure which is the easier process.
So here she is, all done up and ready for her new home. Just wanted to go through a couple of numbers and kind of give you appreciation for how long all those quick cut videos really took. So cutting and final profiling and sanding all the pieces and beveling takes about 3.5 hours. The next step is punching all the holes. I mentioned that I've never actually counted how many holes are in there, so I actually went back and counted all of them. And in total in this bag design, there are 497 holes all punched by hand. That process takes about 1.5 hours. And then once all those component pieces are cut out, I have to weave it all together. Doing each of the end caps all together takes about 45 minutes each, so about 1.5 hours. And then attaching everything together and making the final bag takes about another hour again, and then there's another hour of miscellaneous stuff on there. Those are just the main processes. Overall, each bag takes about 9 hours to put together by hand.
I may not understand any of that.
Not at all. I just wanted you to know how hard it was.
So a lot of work and a lot of love goes into each bag. And she's ready for her new home for decades of use and abuse. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you got any questions about the bag and processing, things that weren't answered by the video itself, feel free to drop a comment. I'll get to them and answer any of the questions you have about our assembly process. But otherwise, thanks for watching and have a great day. Guys, thanks so much for watching our first build along video. Hope you learned a lot or entertained at some point or another. Just want to tell you what we've got going on in the future. Our next video, we've got a couple things, couple irons in the fire. One video coming out is going to be the origins of this bag design, which this is the original right here. This bag itself is over 40 years old, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 45, just shy of 50. This design, when I saw it, I knew I had to bring it back to life. And that's what kind of started this all and bringing this design to the world. So I've got that coming up. We've also got another bag build along video. Focus of that one is going to be more on a custom touch. We're going to be doing theme bags for duffels. We have at least 2 designs planned. Content might take a while. I'll probably release that piecemeal via Instagram or Facebook as we build along. But basically we're going to do a completely covered and tooled design on a brand new duffel. Probably going to be hundreds of hours of work into it, so hope you enjoy that video. I'm really excited about that project. I don't want to reveal too much of it, so that's what we got going on. So stay tuned in the future, and if you're not following us on Instagram or Facebook, make sure you do that so that you can get some of the smaller videos, the pre-releases, quicker videos about what's going on. As far as YouTube goes, we're going to be starting our education series on what leather is to educate people that want to buy leather but don't know a lot about it. So be looking for that video series as well. As always, appreciate you guys watching. Like, comment, subscribe on the video, and really appreciate all your support. Y'all have a good day.